Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zoom into Wine. It's time for the show and your host, Ian Blackburn.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm sitting in the very cold wine room at Merchant of Wine, where we produce these Zooms. And it is freezing here. I hope you guys are doing well. We've got a wonderful audience that are going to join Mr. Paul Hobbs here in a second. But I just want to take a second and hope everyone's holiday is going well and get ready for a big night here of wine. Zoom into Wine and learn about wine and all of our different websites that we produce events on. We're very fortunate to have had a lot to do this past year, and we're working hard now on planning a busy 2022. We're going to continue to Zoom every Wednesday, and I hope you guys will continue to join us. We're going to continue to invent new tastings and gatherings and making sure everybody. One of my clients, this happens quite often, just did not get the Zoom link, so I got to take care of him at the same time. But 1 second. And there. So I produce quite a few wine gatherings in person. We're starting to do that. We have a little Christmas holiday party this Saturday night. Following the Christmas moment, we will also have a New Year's champagne tasting. Both those events are posted right now on our master calendar at Wine Cloud Inc. or Learn About Wine or any of our websites. You can get to the master calendar. I have now produced somewhere close to 200 Zooms in the past 2 years, and I will say that tonight is quite a fantastic gathering for us. We're so proud to be able to bring you all together with a real legend in the wine industry, Mr. Paul Hobbs. Paul earned his Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from the University of Notre Dame in 1975. And his master's in viticulture and enology from the University of California, Davis in 1978. Shortly thereafter, he became a member of the enology team at Robert Mondavi Winery. And 1 year later, at the behest of Robert Mondavi himself, Paul was invited to be on the inaugural team at Opus One. A first trip to Argentina in 1988 marked the beginning of a South American winemaking career that carries on today with his wines from Vineyard Locations and his legendary status as a pioneer who launched Malbec's rise to fame. And there's a great story there. Today, Paul is the owner and winemaker for Sebastopol, California's based wineries Paul Hobbs Winery and Cross Barn, as well as an international partnership at Vineyard Locations in Argentina, Crocus of Cahors in France, and Jacobian Hobbs in Armenia, and his two latest projects in development, Hillick and Hobbs Estate, focusing on Finger Lakes Riesling, and an emerging venture in the Ribera Sacra, Spain. For 40 years, Paul Hobbs has managed to navigate producing wine globally, 2 harvests every year, across 9 countries. His passion for viticulture, winemaking, and innovation has been honored by the likes of Robert Parker Jr., the wine advocate, twice naming him Wine Personality of the Year, recognizing his wines with multiple 100-point scores, including his Paul Hobbs 2002 Cabernet Sauvignon from the famed Tokelon Vineyard, which really launched that vineyard into the limelight, as well as Forbes magazine referring to him as the Steve Jobs of the wine industry. That's quite a title. Regarded as an international visionary in his accomplishments in the vineyard and winery, Paul Hobbs combines his childhood roots on his family farm from upstate New York with an innovative scientific approach to refining the art of winemaking. He is recognized across the globe for breaking with tradition and forging new paths in pursuit of excellence. both in the stewardship of the land and the crafting of wines that represent the purest concept of place, leading the way in the early 1990s as a pioneer of site-specific vineyard-designated wines. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Paul Hobbs. Mr. Hobbs.
Good evening, Ian. How are you this evening?
Fantastic. So great to meet you in person. I have actually been on the other end of you pouring wine at a big event and being able to say hi, but it's really an honor to have you here tonight and to share your time with our group. And the group spans far and wide. We've got people sitting in Napa Valley right now. David K., did you get on? I hope you did.
Yes, we're here.
Made it. Good.
We made it. We got Paul. I couldn't find went to Gary, so we got a 2016 Cab Franc. It's absolutely incredible. That's the Nathan Coombs estate. That one there.
Couldn't find
that. All right.
Great.
So we're
How's
just
the weather over your way tonight? It's quite stormy here in Sebastopol.
Yeah, it's wet and cold and rainy, but I love it. I'm good.
We love it. We need it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. We've got friends down in San Diego, and we sent wines in 20 different directions for this event. So we want to thank everybody for being on the Zoom, and we do things a little differently around here. We love for people to be involved, to ask questions, use that chat box. And if you want to watch this later, it's posted on our Facebook pages, so you can go there immediately and watch it or refer to it at any point in time. We also have a Zoom into Wine library, which we will clean this up and post to the library for future viewing. Whenever you're going to taste a Paul Hobbs wine from our Merchant of Wine website, we have that video right there for you to be able to learn a lot about the producer. And we have a lot to cover tonight, so we want to get right into it. And Maria Brown is also on the Zoom with us. Maria, how are you tonight?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Maria is a fantastic representative for you, Mr. Hobbs. So we're very pleased to have her in the room. I've known her for a long time here in Los Angeles, in the sommelier community, and she does a great job for you. So,
I second the motion.
So we've got a really beautiful PowerPoint to help guide us, but there's so many questions I want to ask, and so I want to use the PowerPoint as a guide, but I also know that we're going to run out of time. It's going to happen. And we've got 3 amazing wines for us to taste. So what I'd like to do is have everybody get your number 1. We put them all in these little vials here. We got the name of the wine down at the bottom. We're going to start off with a Godello, and I'd love to get the wine in the glass so that everybody could start to drink and feel comfortable. And I want to toast everyone and wish everybody a happy holiday. And thank you, Mr. Hobbs, for being with us to get this holiday season started off right. Cheers, everyone.
Distinct pleasure. Cheers.
When I saw the list of wines that Maria brought together for us to consider, the Godello popped off the page because I have been so enamored with what I'm seeing happening in this part of the wine universe. There's so much innovation and so much to be made aware of with this grape variety. I think 5 years ago, I wouldn't have even have paid attention to a Godello, but all of a sudden there's so many good versions, and this is just incredible stuff. So let's start with this one. And how did you get started there making wine in Spain, of all places?
Well, frankly, I didn't know much about Spain, and it was at the New York Wine Experience. The Wine Spectator hosts nearly every October in New York City, and I was approached by a gentleman that had a book that he had put together on the town where he grew up, and he had been reading about, well, frankly, his grandfather, his father had been vignerons, and but he grew up in the town, was schooled there, but moved to the U.S. And then this town, as many small towns in this rugged part of Spain, over 3,000 have said they've nearly gone into extinction. So they've lost. So he made it his mission to kind of, do something that would bring health, financial health, and bring people back to the town. I think his mother, in fact, was one of the last inhabitants. So he approached me at the New York Wine Experience. He was familiar with my work in Argentina, the pioneering work that you mentioned that I did there on helping to bring Argentina into the international forum, and also Malbec. And so he felt that I might be able to help this part of Spain gain some recognition. And that's how it really began.
Well, and I mean, your track record here, your biography, it reads like the way the wine industry has been on a trajectory for the past 40 years is right in sync with a lot of the moves that have propelled your career, from the advent and the start of Opus One in the late 1970s to your involvement in Argentina. You founded Vineyard Locations in 98, but you were a consultant there in Argentina prior, right?
Yes, I made my first foray into South America in '88. At that point, I was looking for it was a career move. I was 7 years at Mondavi and 6 years on Opus, and then I was with CME, and then I just was getting ready to do my own thing. And so I was looking to see if I could start a winery here in California, where we're based, of course. But also I really didn't know what the next step would be and how I would get the funds together to start an enterprise. And then I just happened to make this trip down to Argentina. Well, actually it was into Chile. And my host was a gentleman that I'd gone to school with at UC Davis, Marcelo Kogan, who was earning his PhD in agronomy. And so he set me up for a week of visits through the wineries of Chile. But that visit, I decided to invite another classmate friend of mine, Jorge Catena. And so he came over, but what I didn't realize, the faux pas in that invitation was still there was a great animosity between the two countries from the Falkland Island Wars with the Malvinas Islands. Chile had aided and abetted the British. And so when I brought this Argentine fellow into Chile, that caused quite a consternation. My host demanded that I send him back to Argentina. This guy was like a stalker, wouldn't go back. And so finally, I relented. And on a lunch, and after 3.5 days, I agreed to have lunch with Catena. I took him I drank a little too much wine, I suppose, so I got loosened up a little bit too much and decided, hey, I'd not seen any state secrets, so I'll take him to my next visit, which was at Viña Canapa. And that evening, when I got back to Kogan's home, I was ushered out, and that was the end of our relationship. It took 20 years to patch it up, but frankly, that's how I got to Argentina. So that was Catena's mission, as a matter of fact, was to get me to go to Argentina, and he succeeded. So on Friday, we drove over the Andes from the Chilean side into Mendoza, and the rest is sort of history. I began working extensively building the Catena wine program, and then finally left that to build my own program in 1998.
Well, let me ask you this hard question, because this is the story I've been telling people for over 20 years myself. It was around 1994, and that number you could correct, but 1994, you told the Catena family, hey, I can help you make really good Cabernet, but this Malbec is amazing, and I think you have a huge future with Malbec. Is that pretty close?
Sort of. Frankly, I didn't know anything about Malbec, and so when I got there, Catena wanted to make Chardonnay first and Cabernet second, and he thought that Malbec was just a blending variety, and everyone at that period, they were pulling out their old grape vineyards so they could plant something more productive. I started experimenting with Malbec in '92, and when the U.S. press, 5 members of the lead members of the U.S. press came down to write about the program that we were working with a Chardonnay, I had made Malbec in a small corner of the winery without Catena's knowledge, and it was an article written by Tom Stockley, Seattle Times. Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, that sort of forced Catena's hand to make Malbec. So that's kind of how it launched. So in 1994, we launched Malbec under a brand called Alamos. The Alamos brand that people might know today was built strictly as a vehicle to launch Malbec.
Wow. Well, Malbec went on to be a pretty big hit in Argentina, so I'm sure a lot of countries would love that kind of an overlap. And now we're heading into your Paul Hobbs empire, the world map here, and your plot to take over the wine world, one small property at a time. We are now in Galicia, Spain, and we're going to be looking at the wine that hopefully is in your glass if you're able to taste with us, the Godello. Tell us how this came together.
So as I mentioned, this gentleman approached me out of the blue at the New York Wine Experience. I believe this was 2009, and gave me this book, and then asked me, it was maybe not the best time to kind of catch my ear, but the book I kind of kept, and then I read about it, and then he called me later. And finally, I didn't know much, as I mentioned, I didn't know much about Spain. Certainly I didn't know about the indigenous varieties of this region of Galicia, which is northwestern Spain, rugged country. What I knew about Spain was more flatland or rolling hills where grains are planted, or even, the Ribera del Duero, or these areas, but are not nearly as mountainous. And so when I got intrigued, I started reading up on the history of the region and thought, well, I should go pay this a visit, when I realized that the Romans had developed a number of the vineyards on very steep slopes, similar to what they had done in the Mosel. And I didn't really have any familiarity with Godello or Mencia, which is the red variety. In fact, the region, or the little province that we're in, is called Ribera del Duero. I'm sorry, what am I saying? It's Ribera Sacra.
Right.
And we are also, and it's really known for this red variety called Mencia. Right next to us is Veldores, and that's more the better known region, I suppose, for production of Godello. But what we are is a mountain-driven enterprise in this town called Alvaredos. And you can see our location where the AH is in the province of Galicia. This little department that we're in is on the Sil River. So in that first photo, you might have noticed the river far down below. And it really behaves in many ways as the Mosel does, providing fog and cooling for the vineyards, because it can get quite warm during the day. So we have foggy mornings, typically till about midday. Then the fog clears and we get nice warm ripening weather on slaty soils. And there's a lot, this region of Europe, in fact, is the world's most significant producer of high quality slate. And so these soils, if we get a good photo here, you might be able to get a glimpse at the soils, are high slate content, but they have mica and other types they're really fascinating soils, low, of course, lower in organics and low vigor, which creates all the concentration that you see in the glass here. It's a very perfumed wine.
There's that picture of that vineyard again.
Yeah, this is the Sil River down below. This is one of our terraces. But you can see this is actually quite small in terms of is like postage stamp sized vineyards. If you notice, just to the left of the A You'll see a small, there you go, a small vineyard. That's also ours. That's closer to the river. And these are all tiny little plots that have been carved out of the hillside.
Amazing.
A lot of this cannot be farmed with a tractor, so it's still the old-fashioned horse and plow approach. Very organic, and everything that we do is mostly either walked, or if we need an animal or more horsepower, so to speak, then we might employ an animal to help us. Here in this photo, you see the small village up in the upper left-hand corner. That's the town of Veldores, where my partner Antonio, he was born in this town. His mother still lives there, and I didn't. He turned this building in the lower right-hand photo, and you'll see this little window that's in the cupola there. That's where the winery is, and so we converted these buildings into a small winery that were basically homes and apartments. So that's where we make the wine. But most importantly is the vineyard. And you can see how slaty black the soils are in that photo in the upper left-hand corner, showing you, and these vines are quite old. They're on their own root. And it's just, you find any little area where you can plant, and that's what they've done here. It's a really, truly beautiful natural area. It's a lot of weather.
It looks like it, but raw material galore here to work with. The ecosystem looks alive and well.
I think the most true enough, Ian, that I think the most tech aspect of the vineyard is that we do employ drip irrigation, which is kind of a vital thing nowadays.
Okay. So you get there, you don't have a lot of knowledge about Gadeo or the indigenous varieties or that appellation, but you obviously saw the potential to be able to jump at this project. What was it that was the most significant thing about it that made you say, let's do it?
Well, it's something you kind of smell in the air. It's hard to really put a finger on it. It's a combination of the people, and of course, the individual, the passion of my partner, the effort that he had gone to reconnect a number of these small little plots of land to make them viable. Because as many of you listening might be aware, that in Europe, the traditional approach was to, from one generation to the next, is as an inheritance, is to subdivide the vineyard and give them to all your offspring. So the vineyards became increasingly subdivided to the point where some of them became uneconomical. Antonio's effort predated mine, or my joining in roughly 10 years. He had been working on reassembling, he started just with his grandfather's plots, and then he got quite possessed with this whole process and then expanded that. But even so, if you look at the map in his office, it blows your mind how these little teeny 2 or 3 rows had to be reconnected with a neighbor and so on and so forth. So that truly a labor of love. But then it's just, these soils are unique in the world. And one of the reasons the label looks the way that it does, of course, this area had the highest concentration of monasteries in all of Europe. And also it was the slate, or the sort of the slate background, which is so important to the soils of the region, are reflected in the dark background of the label itself. And then the gold, much of the Vatican was built on gold extracted from this region and other parts of Rome. So it was one of the reasons that Romans developed or came to this region, as tough as it was for the gold. But so historically it has great interest, but from a winemaking point of view, it had the weather, the soils, the slopes, the drainage, the air drainage, everything that one would kind of look for. And the Romans had sort of all figured this out. Obviously, they planted the Mosel, not the Germans, but the Romans. And so I have a German partner on my New York project that has a tiny percentage And when we started to develop from scratch, he's been in the farm. His family's been farming for over 600 years. He had never developed a vineyard from scratch the way we were doing in New York. So it was quite unnerving for him. He was very uncomfortable with the process. So it just, 600 years in the business and never developed a vineyard. I found that intriguing.
Well, I agree with Lauren's comment about 2 ounces of this wine is not enough. It goes really quick, Lauren. But some really cool comments on the chat bar about some of the notes that people are smelling. A little guava. A note. Someone said botrytis. That's pretty astute. I think, is that botrytis or is that caramelized kumquat note there? Just
it's a function of the grape, but one could imagine there's some botrytized character. I mean, if you're familiar with, I don't know, Sauterne style or Azu style wines from Tokai, yes, it does have a little bit of honey, apricot,
yeah,
character, sure. But it's not. There's no botrytis. That's just the personality of the berry itself. What I love is the texture and this minerality. It's I think it really does speak to the soil. It's quite unique from any other kind of wine from any other part of the world that I've had.
It is just glorious, and the perfume is amazing. You should bottle this just as a fragrance on its own. And then your palate hits that slate minerality. You said slate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it bounces right off that rock and really holds an incredible rail here. It's just really an awesome bottling. One of the more unique Odeos that I've been fortunate to taste, and I love it. And we intend to carry this for a long, long time until we can't carry this vintage anymore. But we're excited about this project for you. I know you've got a number of different wines coming online, but I hope this one stays really important because I think this is just such a great opportunity for the wine industry, and there's still good value here, and yet the wines I think could compete with something 2-3 times its price point from another place in another grape variety. I think it draws also on the popularity of that kind of that anything but Chardonnay movement, but also gives Chardonnay lovers some place to kind of connect. It's just right in the middle there, and I'd love it.
I certainly concur with that. I think that's well articulated. That it does satisfy a Chardonnay's lover, but it is more mineral driven, and we do that intentionally. It does go through the malolactic fermentation, and it's aged in these large foudres that are French oak foudres that give it just a little more support and breadth across the palate. But that's why I think you're right about the Chardonnay comment, and that it gives you a little alternative. It's got some Chardonnay-esque like characteristics.
Yeah. And who does your label design? You have one team that does that for you?
Well, in this particular case, it's done by a gentleman, Michael McDermott. He's out of Napa, but he's originally from the Midwest. And he traveled, we brought him to Spain and to Galicia so he could get a sense of the region. And of course, we took him around to see the monastery so you can see some of the impact of that. And so he saw these plaques and things, that would have been used, made out of stone. And then the hammered gold, of course, is a reference to the Romans' exploitation of the gold of the region. Yeah, so he basically picked up on the key elements and put them into the labels. I thought he did a nice job with it.
So simple, but so detailed and rich at the same time. Really nice, really nice.
He actually, Ian, just so you and our guest tonight know, that gold that and all that is one thing, but what he actually did was create his own letters. He made his own alphabet. That's his own.
Ah, very cool. No.
Yeah, he didn't. That wasn't anything that he got out of a book.
No
building and stuff.
font, no font licensing required, huh? That's good. Well, very cool, and a great start. I appreciate everyone hitting the chat bar there and getting involved, but love to bring in the gallery here and just check in with some folks. Janice Carroll, good to see you, and Santa Monica. Also, Sean and Shannon Scott are my shoe entrepreneurs. They own Community Shoes in downtown, handmade shoes in downtown. Always got to plug them. Yeah, they're the best rides you can get. We got to get Paul Hobbs in a pair of your rides. He'll might require a royalty fee to get him to wear those.
We can do one with this gold foil on it. It'd be amazing.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hi, Lisa Test.
Ciao, Ian.
Ciao. We have some friends that went to Italy. And Teresa's on the Zoom as well. I read some of your story, Teresa. I don't want to comment right now, but I'm so glad you made it back.
So do I. I'm glad I'm tasting this wine right now. It's like rocking my world.
That's great. Awesome. Zoe, I'm so happy to see your face.
Hey, Ian. How are you?
She's my Dodger compadre. We watch every game on our phones together.
We win together, we lose together.
Yeah. But super happy to have you all with us, and please continue to chat it up. And if you have some comments along the way, feel free to get involved here. Let's move into our wine number 2 as we head to another unique destination. And I have had a little bit more experience with Armenian wines recently than maybe the average bird, but there's still not a lot of Armenian wines available here in Los Angeles, at least not at this level. And I think that's the real key, is that Paul's bringing something to the marketplace that really hits a high quality level. And I was really taken with this opportunity to talk to you about this, because I think it's a newer project for you, and I have quite a few Armenian friends, and they love their wine. I'm going to get us into the PowerPoint. And how did this project come together?
Well, in many respects, similar to, frankly, all these international projects are usually, I get sought out by someone that wants to do something together, and this is no different. What happened here, and this happened quite some time ago. In fact, I think I was still living in Healdsburg, so this is probably 12, 14, maybe 14 years ago. A gentleman called me late one night. I think I'd already gone to bed and left a message. So the next morning I got the message, and he had been in a restaurant with his wife, and they had a bottle of Paul Hobbs Cuvée Agostina Pinot Noir. And in those days, I don't know, had the temerity, or I'm not sure. But anyways, I had put the phone number on the cork, something I don't do anymore. So he called me up and left a message, and was singing the praises of the wine. And then, so I called back and said thanks and all that. And then he and his brother decided, well, we'd like to come up and meet. And so we met in St. Helena, and they expressed interest, and they had boned up on some of my work in South America and so on. And so they were interested, being Armenians, to develop a small project, but high quality project. And they had some other connections. The Yakubian brothers, Vahe at that time, I believe, was legal counsel to the president of the country, and he had a construction business and so on. Well, they brought me on one of my trips to Europe. They just said, well, one of these times when I'm in Europe, I'll go over to Armenia. It's really not easy to get there. And usually, and it's always different. I mean, you can go through Vienna, Austria, maybe you can connect out of Moscow, sometimes out of Heathrow in London, or de Gaulle in France, in Paris, or maybe out of Rome. But it's never quite easy and so on, and it's quite a long flight. It's usually overnight. So, but you get there like at 4 a.m, and when I first arrived, they hadn't built the new airport, and it was truly this feeling of arriving into Soviet times. And the airport, actually, I thought, actually one morning when we went there to take a flight, I thought the airport was shut down. It was so dark and ominous. He said, no, the airport's open. It's just the way it looks. Yeah, what a beautiful place. I mean, there you have this photo of Mount Ararat. It's the world's oldest Christian churches, which, I mean, historically, it has great interest. And then when we got to we started scouring the countryside for where to put our own vineyard. And it's a small country bordered by 4 neighbors, only one of them sort of friendly. Azerbaijan, Iran, and particularly Turkey, they have strained relations. So only Georgia to the north has somewhat reasonable relations. So one of the challenges was, if we make something, are we going to be able to export it? And if we need to bring in materials from Europe or the US, would we be able to get those, equipment and or some of the materials that we would need from the Western Europe or US? Would we be able to get it into the country? All those were real challenges for us in the early years.
I bet. Yeah, you're truly having to think about every kink in the food chain to be able to make this project hit and accessible. And this is a high elevation, right?
It is. I mean, fortunately, I had quite a lot of experience with high elevation in Argentina with our work in the Andes and the Valle de Uco. However, this is a different type of high elevation environment. It's colder, wetter, and we get snow, and the slopes are much, I wouldn't say they're necessarily, well, they are steeper, frankly. They're steeper and they're narrower. You can see the vineyard that we planted in the upper right-hand corner, and the lake in the distance is Azerbaijan. So we're right on the border, virtually, within I think it's less than 10 miles to that lake. That's Azerbaijan. And so we planted it. The photo doesn't really show you the steepness or how small a tongue is that comes off the mountainside. But I just found this thing to be fascinating. And on either side of this flat area where they were planted, it's flat in 2 directions, but sloping in the other direction. And then it's almost like a sheer drop off on either side of this tongue. So it makes for exciting viticulture if you go over the end of it. You keep driving your tractor, you might end up somewhere you don't want to be.
Wow. Well,
but in the photo, let me just point out something. You see those stakes. This is a newly planted vineyard, and we wanted to I don't think we would do this again, frankly, because it was very expensive and kind of a crazy idea, but we re-engineered, because the old world way of doing it was to use concrete posts as line posts for grapes. And so we set it up so that we could use mobile wires and all that. And so we engineered it and had these made to our specifications. But each stake weighs something like over 110 pounds. A regular grape stake in California that we use, a highway stake, weighs something like 3 pounds, maybe less, very lightweight. So you have to be kind of beefy and that's not the end post, by the way. That's just the grape. That's just the
wow. So these aren't wood. These are concrete.
Those are concrete.
Oh my gosh.
they will survive the vineyard 4 or 5 times over, and they will obviously outlive, five or 6 generations before they need to be replanted.
Yeah, and
Maybe more.
future
That vineyard's there to stay.
future times they'll refer to this as the after COVID, the AC vineyard. And so document, and that'll be amazing. Wow.
In the photo that you see in the lower right-hand corner, those are my partners, Vegan and Vahe in the back. Vahe is the attorney. Vegan is, well, he's actually a school principal, but these guys are wine monsters. They are so into wine. That's all they talk about. I don't even know how they have another job.
Wow. Well, they look very proud. And of course, there's quite a wine culture in this area, and history. Some of the oldest proof of ancient viticulture.
Yes, this cave, by the way, was discovered about 3 years after we bought our vineyard land and began to develop it. And then out of nowhere, we got wind that there was an archaeological dig, and there were UCLA archaeologists working with Armenian PhDs. And so this cave, now known as the Irony One Cave, which was discovered in 2011. Well, we were there in 08, 09. So we were already, but we didn't know. And there's a restaurant at the base of this place, and nobody knew that this cave existed. It had been sealed up. So what you're seeing here is the amphora as part of the excavation. Some of these amphora date back to over 6,000 years ago. So in other words, 4,100 BC, before Christ. And I would say that some of the stories of Noah, because this is in the Arpa Valley and there's a small river, and that as they dig down, and they're only allowed to dig so far, and then they have to stop and excavate and then wait and study everything, and then they're allowed to maybe dig again. They've already been through 2 or 3 sedimentations that show that this river sedimented and filled the cave up, and then they had to rebuild. So it just kept on getting higher and higher. So we don't know how many more layers down before they get to the base of this development. Curiously, also, they say that this was not for commercial wine production, but for ceremonial purposes. So it's really, but I got one of the first glimpses of it because I snuck up and climbed around there when there was nobody around. But then they gated it off, and maybe they figured out there were more than just one Snoopy guy looking around. So then they couldn't get into it for a while, but now it's open to the public.
Oh, amazing.
Some of the amphora, by the way, were built off-site, others on-site. And one of the things, if you go to Yerevan, there's a catacomb network under the city. That, in fact, there's a castle there where, the kings and the royalty lived, and they would go under these catacombs to come up in another part of the city. So rather than travel above ground, they travel below ground, and then they reappear where they wanted to within the city. And down there, you could find amphora that predate the Egyptian period. And so it's quite interesting. And so before hieroglyphics, they had some markings on the amphora, and they discovered that the historians were telling us, how did they protect the wine? And they discovered that, by burning sulfur, that you could kill a person. So, that was one of the ways that they could put someone to death in a closed area. And so they figured that would be a solution to hold the wine. And so that's kind of an interesting concept that from a microbiological, I had no idea really, but they would burn sulfur and then that would help preserve the wine just by chance. At least that's what their historian told us.
Wow. And so you get approached with this project, and you decided to kind of visit some of the varieties that are indigenous there. Is that how this particular wine became a project?
Yeah, we didn't know which. I mean, there were a lot of indigenous varieties from which to choose, and a fellow by the name of Vahe Kishkirian had done a fair amount of research. So he had made micro vinifications of many different varieties, none of which would be familiar to people in Eastern or Western Europe or in the New World. But these are old world varieties, and we settled on Areni, and it just so happens now it's become kind of the go-to classic old variety. There's a small village or town, and we don't know if it was named after the variety or the variety was named after the town, and the town is over 6,000 years old. Wow. And what's fascinating is within these amphora, they've taken residue and done carbon dating and other DNA analysis on that, and the genetic string is identical to today's Areni. So it's clear that this variety existed as it does today over 6,000 years ago.
Amazing. Well, for many of you, this may be your first time trying this grape variety, or even trying an Armenian wine, but I've got a couple in the store, and I even have one that's a sparkling wine that has this grape variety involved. But not having tasted it at quite this level before, it brings something different to the wine. And really, what is it that you're aiming to achieve with the nose and the mouth, and what is your vision for this, and what are we tasting, what are we looking at here?
Right. Well, one tries to associate it with something that that they might be familiar with. Is it like a Pinot Noir in color? I mean, it's not much darker than a Pinot Noir, so it has somewhat of the same characteristics in terms of pigmentation, the anthocyanins, and the tinting. But on the other hand, there's the berry and the morphology of the cluster. It's more like a Syrah. And of course, we know that not too far away to the south in Iran is a town of Shiraz, and where Syrah is said to have first been discovered. So the berry itself has something that more related to a Syrah, but in terms of the wine that one makes from it, I think it has some maybe Nebbiolo-like, Pinot Noir-like characteristics. So maybe the Piedmont region of Italy, if you were to look at that, maybe not quite as much of the bracing or the tannin structure and the texture, but I'm mainly looking for it to be just. This is a very cleanly made wine, meaning that we didn't complicate it with a lot of barrels or any. Mainly, this is you're just getting here's the honest expression of this particular grape grown all these years. By the way, this is not from our vineyard. This was from our growers around our vineyard, because our vineyard is just coming into production now in the last couple of years. So these are very old vines, recklessly, by the way, pruned with reckless abandon. There's no theory or logic to the way they prune, and but then we have taken a little more modern approach and work with the grower to farm them so that we get the maturity, the way we'd like, and the concentration of the flavor in that way. But so all I'm after really is to kind of express the grape in its native environment.
Well, beautifully done.
Paul, I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
In regards to the, are you using any wood on this, or is it amphoras, or are you keeping it to the old traditional form of winemaking there?
Yeah, This is probably the region of the world that does more amphora than any other part of the world. Maybe Georgia as well. So our neighbor is Zora, they do almost exclusively amphora. The problem that I have with amphora is that it's quite porous and it imparts is anything but neutral. So whatever the amphora is made of, and it's kind of damp and clay-like characteristic, gets imparted into the wine. So in the end of the day, it's hard to know what is this grape taste like when you're tasting out amphora. What is it real characteristic versus what's the amphora contributing? I'm not saying it's a better or worse kind of thing, but I wanted to express the variety without alteration. And so we don't use amphora. We use stainless steel or large foudre or large wood vat, but they're neutral.
Very good.
So now I'm not looking for oak flavor, oak. So there's no oak on it. This is I guess that you could say the real McCoy. Unadulterated, no lipstick, no mascara.
And it is a slightly shorter growing window there, right? Because of its...
Yes, given the high elevation, you're right. Although, and it's subject to hailstorms as we have in Argentina. So when you're operating at that elevation over 4,000 feet, we're a little over 1,300 meters, 1,325 to 1,350. Weather is always a factor, and it can be harsh. But yeah, it is a shorter growing season.
And so you're going to have really hot features from the heat of summer, and yet maintain some acidity because of the length of that growing season.
Yeah, and then it cools down. It's one of the cool things about continental climates versus maritime climates is that they cool down in the fall faster. So here in California, we have more stronger Indian summer effect, but because we're maritime. But when you're in continental regions, even we can say that's true of Argentina as well. When you're over land, there's less buffering by a large body of water, and so it cools off. So you may have a hotter summer, which is what would be the case here, as they do in many parts of, like Burgundy, for example, has a fairly warm summer, but quite cool in the fall. But we can get a long extended period of hang time, without having the sugar move at all. It's a beautiful thing.
Because of that declining temperature.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, I really enjoy this wine, and I've had it with some great food in Los Angeles. We are so fortunate to have so many, whether it's Armenian, pure play on Armenian food or just Mediterranean food. And it's one of my favorite categories to pair all wines with, including my own. But I love this with, lamb kebab and that type of a dish. And I'm not sure if that's truly authentic to the region, but that's what it's presented to as here at the local Armenian restaurant.
Well, I'm not that familiar with the local Armenian in the LA area, but they should be pretty good, I would imagine, particularly when you get up to Glendale. But,
yeah.
But in Armenia, the cuisine is exquisite. The flavor, the natural flavors, the farming. One of the things I really, in a sense, rediscovered from my own childhood is that the mix of animals and the old, the ancient form of farming is still in practice there. So manure is moved to fertilize the crops, and so it just brought back all the sights and smells of my early childhood. And so I think that's what Rudolf Steiner and biodynamic farming was trying to capture when the Industrial Revolution hit. They wanted to basically just preserve this natural way of farming that has been going on now for millennia.
For sure.
So it's just interesting. It's so sustainable, so subsistence that that these guys have been working the land. These people have been doing this for thousands of years, and everything just seems to be in harmony, in perfect harmony.
That's great. So you, although the flight may be a little bit difficult, you enjoy making these cross-continental flights, because it would be a little easier if you just made like most California winemakers, just flew back and forth, maybe to Oregon or Washington.
Yeah. The flights are really not that much fun, but the reward is there. Getting there at 4 a.m. is not a play. And then normally getting out of there, the flight, you have to get up at 3 a.m. to get to the airport so that part's not that much fun. But the cuisine, and one of the cool things in this little village, my partners have never really been in a village like this. And so we were invited into someone's home, which is, they're solidly built, but they're austere. There might be a couple of curtains, very thin drapes on the wall. Then almost everybody in the village makes their own wine. So the lovely older couple that took us down to their cellar and showed us, where they were making wine, asked me to try it. And my partner said, "Is it safe to try?" And they brought out some nice cheese, kind of the raw. And my partners weren't very comfortable eating that either. But I said, don't worry, everything is nice and sanitary, and it's fine. So they're Armenian, but they're not farmers. They didn't grow up on a farm or anything like that. But
they drive really nice cars.
Really rustic, and the people are very kind and sweet.
Wow, very cool. Well, I'm loving it, and I hope everyone did too. It's actually selling quite well, and we're excited to feature this wine tonight. And you do have a lot of wines that we could pick from, and I would imagine probably a lot of your winemaker dinners and stuff, they go straight for the amazing To Kalon Cabernets and stuff that you celebrate, and they are beautiful. But I just wanted to kind of show maybe a little slightly different side, and kind of come maybe through paths a little less walked, and I thought this would be a really fun adventure for us. So but with that, we are going to finish with one of your benchmark wines, your Paul Hobbs Pinot Noir, and we are tasting today the 18. I want to let folks know I still just have a couple bottles of 18 left, but we will move into the 19. In fact, the 19's here, so if you would like either 18 or 19, but all these wines are in stock on the Merchant of Wine website, and everyone's been given a code, get a discount on bottle 1 if you use that code at checkout. But we do feature free delivery here in Los Angeles on orders over $100, and $10 delivery anywhere in California. So jump on the website and grab any of these that you can, and there should be no fear of running out of the wines, but we may change vintage on this Pinot from 18 to 19, and the RNE will also change to 17. So, Pinot Noir, Russian River Valley, Sonoma County. We're tasting the 18 vintage right now. Is this your second largest production, your largest production?
I think today it could be Pinot is our largest of the two varieties that we make, Chardonnay, Cabernet, and Pinot Noir. Today, I believe it is grown to be the largest. I think that's partly a function of the fact that where we're located, the winery is situated near Sebastopol in the heart western heart, if you will, of the Russian River sub-AVA.
Well, it's also probably because you're really freaking good at making Pinot Noir.
Well, thank you, Ian.
This is a spectacular Pinot Noir, and I taste a lot of Pinot Noirs.
Thank you.
There's, and that's always been the case. You just have a really daft touch and a style that's very consistent and really hits it out of the park. Really complex and really brings out the maximum expression of the variety without being overdone. I'm now seeing Pinot Noirs coming in that are just so ripe and so extracted and so this and so that, and you just seem to know where the nice limits are that keep the wine very civilized and ageable and delicious at the same time.
Well, thank you, Ian. Yeah, it's fun to make. It's a challenge. In this particular, but it's a challenge we love. And I think it's a thin-skinned grape. It's temperamental. It has a reputation for being challenging, but that's what gives us pleasure in making it. It's not something, and one of the beautiful things about making Pinot Noir is that it's really a hands-on kind of process, opposed to maybe working with a Bordeaux varietal, which is a little more, well, basically hands-off, and it can be mechanized more. And this, when you're making Pinot Noir, you're pretty much hand-punching it and really interacting like kneading bread or something like that, where you really are making pasta from scratch. It has that kind of, you get that kind of involvement. And because Pinot Noir ferments about, 2.5 times faster than Cabernet Sauvignon, you got to be on the stick. So we basically sleep at the winery when we're making it. Here you can see some of our vineyard locations. We're largely in the western part of the Russian River. Sea influence is extremely important because we need the fog. As you get the Russian River, it moves to the east, it gets much too warm, or even to the north. So we're more to the southern and closer to Bodega Bay. So you see and then we have a vineyard that's not in the Russian River that's shown here. A small percentage of that would go into this bottling as well, called the Gold Rock Estate. That's number 8, way up in Annapolis near the Mendocino border.
Mm. And you make single vineyard bottlings of many of these as well?
Correct, yes. I think everyone here, there's George Menini is new, so that's not quite out in the market yet. Ellen Lane is a Chardonnay vineyard, so that's not relevant, as is Richard Dinner. So not all these are Pinot Noir vineyards. So Gold Rock is Pinot Noir, Catherine Lindsay is Pinot Noir, and Cleary and George Menini, those are all Pinot Noir estates, and there's a few others that are not mentioned here as well.
So you're assorting a wide swath of different clones. Are you it says 9% whole cluster, so that answers my question right there. And what do you look for in a cluster of Pinot Noir to make you decide how much you're going to use?
Yeah, the thing with Pinot Noir is that it ferments quickly and the skins are quite thin. So we've learned that it's important that the fermenter be very shallow. And I first really got clarity on this in November of 1984 when I was visiting the Burgundy region. I spent some time with Henri Jaillet, and then used him and another gentleman as a base from which to operate. For about a month, I spent in the region studying Pinot Noir, how it's made at Domaine de la Romanée-Conti, at Domaine Dujac, at Côte d'Argent, and so on. And there was a great debate about whole cluster inclusion. Henri said no, Domaine de la Romanée, DRC, yeah, 100%. What size the vat should be, how to punch it, how many times, all these things, and they're still debating over it today.
Yep.
and I suppose it'll go on for centuries more. But we have found that whole cluster allows for some intercellular fermentation, which adds a nice red component to the fermentation, but the stem itself helps keep the cap loose, allowing, so it doesn't cake up too hard. And so it doesn't get, that way wine can extract more gently, and we don't have to do as much work, because every time we physically move the cap, it's kind of an aggressive process. Even though it appears soft, it's not. It's mechanical. So the idea is these whole clusters kind of act as little matrices within the cap to kind of keep it open. And then the key is to keep that cap as thin as possible. So that's why we use basically bathtubs, large bathtubs to ferment in. Shallow fermentation. That allows the heat to dissipate because it's generating heat so quickly, and CO2 because it's fermenting so quickly. So that keeps the temperature down. And then the nice trick about it is that then we tromp, breaking up those whole clusters. So why the 18 vintage, I believe this one is about 9%, we are now operating more in the 20% range on a whole cluster. And the beauty of that is you actually, like time release, break as the first fruit that's been broken ferments, then you can extend the fermentation by breaking up the whole cluster and allowing it to ferment with yeast, not just intercellular enzymatic fermentation. I know that's kind of nerdy and I apologize, but I can't help myself.
No, that's great. That's what we're here to do. Nerd out. Well, love to hear some comments about the Pinot Noir or any of the other wines from all the folks that are on the Zoom with us. And
I see a question about why does it ferment faster? Well, nobody knows. But if you get the answer to that, well, it's kind of like that. What's the mimosa tree? Why does it close when you touch it? And what's the mechanism? And science still hasn't been able to figure that thing out. We don't know. There's been a lot of study done on it, but it's not understood why. I can tell you why it's lighter in color if you want to know than most other red varieties.
And?
Now you're really asking for the chemistry of an anthocyanin. So in wine, the pigment is called an anthocyanin, and it has two B rings attached to a C ring. And for those that are chemists out there, it lacks an acyl group. And that gives it a partial, I guess you could say, albinoism.
This is Pinot Noir specifically.
Correct. That's one of the ways that you can easily recognize Pinot Noir is by analyzing its anthocyanins, the pigment, because it's the only variety that has non-acylated pigment. Isn't that exciting?
It explains a lot.
From the land of Jeopardy.
Teresa.
I think that was the one question Alex Trebek does. He never posed that. You know what? I mean, I don't know how to exactly frame the question because I'm not a Jeopardy player, but it would have been a fun thing to see if anybody could have got the answer to that one.
Probably that would have been the irony of it. 3 people on the panel, one of them would have figured it out. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and love the wines. We also have Maria, can you help me? The Malbec blend that we have on our website, it looks, I just think of it as crocodile, but it's not.
Oh, the Cocodrillo, which is cab based with most of the Bordeaux varietals blended in and a touch of Syrah as well.
I just picked that to be in one of our holiday gift big red packages because it is just an absolute pleasure to drink that wine. It is so good. And I mean, it's really kind of hard to narrow down the portfolio. We're a small wine shop, Paul, so you know, if I carried everything that you had to offer, it would be probably the Paul Hobbs wine store.
You wouldn't call it Merchant of Wine anymore.
But certainly wouldn't hurt the quality index. Really good stuff across the board, but the Crocodile is really just a tremendous value too. Because I know, you know, not every day you can open a bottle of Los Cobos or Tocolon or something like that, but that wine's around $30, and it's a absolute sensation. So I would recommend everyone give it a shot if you enjoy wines from Argentina, or even if you just like big reds from California. I think it really crosses over nicely, and that's a delicious offering that we have as well. But we carry all three of these, and we're going to work towards carrying a few more in the future. And we really thank you for your time here. I'm sure some other folks have some questions, but we want to be sensitive to Paul's life.
Well, thank you. No, I saw a couple of nice comments, and one was, you know, the field trip would be great. We'd love to have anyone that would love to visit, whether you all come. I don't know, the group, if we can take your whole entourage there, Ian, and organize one big field trip, that would be a lot of fun.
All right.
Yeah, so, you know,
known to do that.
Get some buses together and come on up, or maybe just commandeer an airplane. And
maybe we can rendezvous with you in one of your international flights too.
Well, that would be cool.
Yeah, I am working on a trip to Mendoza.
Are you?
I took a group about 5, 6, oh gosh, it's probably 9 years now. One of the great trips I've ever been able to take, and so we're gonna do something like that in the fall, God willing.
Yeah, I think if you want to come to, I was just got back from there, and it's not too difficult. But I would, you know, it's possible either in our spring and their fall, which would be March, April, it's a wonderful time to go. Either 2022 or 2023 would even probably be better. But
yeah, we tend to chase the rain around the week of Thanksgiving.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So our fall, yeah, it's a nice time to be there as well.
Yeah, it's just a few less insects.
Paul, just
there was a question about which wine is my favorite. Well, that's really tough. I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for that.
I will say that I got to taste your Finger Lakes Riesling, and that almost made it into the program tonight. That's super fantastic.
Well, we'll have to just do another one of these days, Ian.
Okay.
I would love to do that with you.
Oh, thank you. That would be great. And I'm a huge fan. You know, Finger Lakes have got incredible stony minerality, just like you might find in parts of Germany. And these wines you don't get to taste very often in California because the way of our wine distribution world works. But boy, it is a sensational spot for Riesling, and really exciting when the Paul Hobbs name is attached to it. So definitely be on the lookout for it. And that's probably the next wine we're bringing in here.
Well, thank you. That'd be great. Hillick and Hobbs. That is a great area.
Well, Zoe or Lauren, anyone got anything else for Mr. Hobbs? Teresa?
Yes, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
I am a huge fan of yours. I have the pleasure of selling a lot of your older vintage wines. I work for an auction house. So I've tasted many of your wines, many different vintages, and I'm a huge fan of them. Especially your Cabernets and your Pinot Noirs. So this is super fun to taste these other varietals. And I have to say that your signature is so ingrained in these wines. They're so clean, and the elegance that they have is just all you. It's just they're beautiful.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I appreciate that.
I like it. Cool. Well, I really thank you for being here with us, and I know that the comments have been plentiful there on the chat, but we will definitely try to make a spot where we can rendezvous with Mr. Hobbs at some point and taste with him in person. And if you're ever coming to Los Angeles, maybe we can get involved with promoting a gathering with you being down here as well.
That would be a treat.
All right.
It'd be lovely.
Well, being that it's December 15th, happy holidays to you and your family, and to everybody on the Zoom. Thank you for your time tonight, and we hope to see everybody real soon.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you,
Ian,
Paul.
thank you. Maria.
Thank you.
Bye, Ian.
Besos.
Thank you.
Besos, everyone.
Bye. Thank you,
Ian.
Paul. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great night.
You guys get into the Merchant of Wine website. I've added an obscene amount of wines. Got to make sure you keep me out of trouble financially. You're gonna love a lot of these wines, but man, I have been buying like a drunken sailor. So please get in there and take a look.
I'm
doing my part.
All right, guys.
All right.
Yeah.
Make it a great holiday, you guys. Good to see everybody.
Happy holiday. Good night.
Thanks.